I asked you to close your eyes and picture the definitive object of ancient Egypt, the one thing that just sums up their entire obsession with death, what comes to mind?
Oh, for almost everyone, it's got to be the Book of the Dead. It's just iconic.
Right.
We all picture these, dusty, fragile scrolls in a museum case right next to a mummy, and we just assume they're full of magic spells to help a corpse get through the underworld.
Without getting eaten, exactly. It sounds
Yeah.
spooky and final and, well, dead. But this is where we have to pull the emergency brake. Because the source material we're diving into today, specifically a deep look at the famous Papyrus of Ani, it drops a massive bomb right on page 1.
It really does. And it completely upends how we view this entire civilization. The title, Book of the Dead, is a total misnomer.
It's not what they called it.
Not at all. It's a modern label. A German scholar, Carl Richard Lepsius, invented it in the 1800s because, well, he found these scrolls in tombs. But the actual ancient Egyptian title is Pertem-hu.
Per-em-hu. And what does that actually translate to?
Roughly, it's something like the Book of Coming Forth by Day,
Coming forth by day.
or the Book of Emerging into the Light of Ra.
Okay, emerging into the light sounds like the exact opposite of death.
Precisely. And that's the mission of this deep dive. We're going to strip away all the funerary assumptions we were all taught. The argument in these sources is, well, it's radical, but it's so compelling. This text was not a guidebook for a corpse.
It was a manual for the living.
It was a guide for spiritual initiation, for, waking up and reaching a higher consciousness while you were still breathing.
Which means we've been reading the map completely upside down for 2 centuries. So we're focusing on the Papyrus of Ani. Why this one? I mean, there are tons of copies of these texts, right?
There are, but the texts themselves, they evolved over thousands of years. They started as the pyramid texts,
Carved right into the walls.
right into the stone walls of pyramids for pharaohs, like Unas. Then they democratized a bit and became coffin texts painted on wood for nobles.
And then finally, papyrus.
Finally, in the New Kingdom, they moved to papyrus. But the Papyrus of Ani from about 1250 BC, it's special. It's considered the most complete and honestly the most beautiful version we have. It's over 78 feet long.
78 feet. Wow. So you can't exactly read that on the bus.
No. And unlike other versions that can feel kind of random, like a collection of spells just thrown together, Ani's scroll has a specific, curated design. It's a structured narrative from start to finish.
So let's talk about the man himself. Who was Ani? Was he a pharaoh?
No, and that's important. Ani was a high-ranking official, a true royal scribe. His title was Administrator of the Divine Offerings of All the Gods.
So a master of logistics for the temples. High status, but a bureaucrat.
A very powerful one. He was part of the intellectual elite. And his wife, Tutu, she's right there with him in the text. She was a sistrum player, a musician, and a priestess in the fraternity of Amun.
So they were insiders. They knew exactly what they were commissioning.
Oh, deeply embedded. And that leads to one of the weirdest details. Modern Egyptologists, they get really frustrated with Ani's scroll. You read these commentaries where scholars complain it's full of typos.
Errors in a 78-foot-long masterpiece.
Yes, the famous errors. They'll say the scribe was sloppy, that he misspelled words or repeated lines, or, skipped parts of spells to fit the pictures.
But our source says, hold on, that's not a bug, that's a feature.
Exactly. The argument is that we're looking at it with this modern, literalist lens. The source says these aren't errors, they're codes. The spelling mistakes are often sound games. Subtle shifts in pronunciation meant to give double meanings to an initiate chanting them.
Like a spiritual pun.
Precisely. It's about the vibration of the word. But the biggest clue this wasn't sloppy work is the artwork itself.
The vignettes.
All the evidence suggests the images were drawn before the text was written. The scribe had to literally cram the text into the spaces the artist left.
Which means the pictures were the primary code.
The images tell the real story. The text was selected to support the visual symbolism. Our Anne had a specific multimedia plan.
A multimedia puzzle. I like that. Okay, let's tackle the core argument then. That this is a book for the living. The source makes a really funny but very logical point about it.
It is a bit of a gotcha moment, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The argument basically asks, if this is a guidebook to help a dead person navigate the underworld, how is the dead person supposed to read it?
Right. They haven't been resurrected yet. They're a mummy, brain pulled out through the nose, wrapped in linen. They don't have eyes to see or hands to turn the page.
Exactly. The conventional explanation is that, well, just having the scroll nearby acts like a magical battery.
Yeah.
But the source uses this brilliant analogy. Imagine an archaeologist in the year 5000 digs up a grave from, say, 1950.
Okay, I think I see where this is going.
Inside the coffin, placed in the deceased's hands, is a Bible.
Right.
Would that archaeologist be correct to conclude that the Bible is a funerary manual written exclusively for the dead?
No, of course not. The Bible is for the living. You read it while you're alive. It's buried with you because it was sacred to you.
That is the source's exact stance on the Book of the Dead. Just because we find it in tombs doesn't mean it's for the tomb. It implies it was a holy text, a manual of wisdom they used during their life.
That makes so much more sense. But it brings up a question about access. I've always heard that the Book of the Dead represents the democratization of the afterlife.
That's the standard historical narrative, yes.
That originally only the pharaoh could get to the stars, then nobles, then eventually anyone with enough cash could buy a scroll. And it's usually framed as a good thing.
But our source takes a much more, let's say, cynical view. It argues that what we call democratization was actually decadence.
Oh, interesting. So not spreading the wealth, but diluting the product?
Exactly. The source points to this text, the Admonitions of Ippur, which describes a period of total social chaos in Egypt. And it says, secret chambers are thrown open and sacred formulas are divulged.
The secrets leaked out.
They leaked. This knowledge was originally highly guarded in the temples. But during times of collapse, it became a commodity. It became an insurance policy you could buy, fill in your name, and think you're safe.
Which sounds uncomfortably familiar. You can buy the yoga pants, but you still have to actually do the yoga.
That is a perfect analogy. And Ani's copy comes from an earlier, more precise tradition. We're looking at the real deal here.
Okay, so if this is a guide for the living, what are they actually learning? One of the biggest hurdles the source points out is our understanding of the word God. We see all these animal-headed figures and we just think polytheism.
This is a major linguistic barrier. The Egyptian word usually translated as God is Neter.
Neter, and in the hieroglyphs, there's a sim for it.
Right. Now, if you open a standard textbook, it'll tell you the hieroglyph for Neter is a flag, a pennant on a pole.
A flag. Okay. But our source disagrees.
Vehemently. The source argues if you actually look at the archaeological evidence, ceremonial objects, carvings, columns at Karnak, the object is not a flag at all. It's an axe.
An axe. That has a very different vibe than a flag. A flag is about identity. An axe is about power. Action.
A blade with an edge. The source connects it to the idea of the divine strike, the thunderbolt. A Neter isn't a guy in the sky. It's a divine principle, a function.
So when we see the plural, neteru, the gods, we shouldn't be thinking of a council of people. We should be thinking of, what? Forces of nature.
Adjectives, that's the best way to frame it. The source emphasizes that the Egyptian elite were not primitive polytheists. They understood a single unity. The gods were just aspects of that unity.
Can you give me an example of that? Because it's hard to wrap your head around worshiping adjectives.
Sure, think of wind. You can have a gentle breeze and a hurricane, a totally different experience, different faces of the air, but they are both wind. For the Egyptians, Amun is the hidden spirit. Ra is the creative light. They aren't different beings fighting. They're facets of one diamond.
That clears up so much. But speaking of controversy, we have to talk about Akhenaten.
Ah, Akhenaten.
Their heretic king. He's usually the darling of modern historians, right? The romantic visionary, the first monotheist. But the source does not share that view.
Not at all. The source takes a scorching hot take here. It views Akhenaten not as a visionary, but as a dangerous fanatic. The argument is he didn't invent monotheism because the Egyptians already understood unity through the Neteru.
So what did he do then, according to this analysis?
He materialized it. He took a high spiritual concept, Amun, the invisible hidden spirit, and he replaced it with a physical object, Adenton, the actual physical sun disk in the sky.
He dumbed it down.
He reduced the metaphysical to the physical. The source even calls him the inventor of the Inquisition because he used military force to shut down the other temples. It wasn't a reformation, it was a spiritual regression.
That completely flips the script. So if the book is a guide to navigating these paths, what's the destination? What does initiation actually mean here?
Well, it isn't just learning a secret handshake. The source compares it to a biological process. It likens it to puberty.
Puberty. That's not a comparison I expected.
But think about it. You can explain adulthood to a child all day. You can give them a book. But they can't be an adult until they undergo a biological change. Initiation is described as a spiritual metamorphosis. You literally change what you are.
And there's a specific term for where this happens, right? Ra-stau.
Ra-stau. Standard archaeology translates that as subterranean passages. like the tunnels under Giza, a physical place.
Mm-hmm.
But the source breaks the word down. Ra is the light, the creative power. Stau means to pull or to extract.
Extracting the light.
Extracting Ra from within. It's an internal process.
This connects to something that really surprised me, the link to Eastern traditions. We see the pharaohs with that snake on their forehead, the uraeus.
The cobra, yes.
And I always just thought, cool, snake hat. But the source connects this to the two serpents and yoga.
This is where it gets fascinating. The source points out that in yoga, you have the Ida and Pingala, two energy channels that snake up the spine. And the goal is to balance those energies to open the third eye.
And the Egyptians were mapping the same physiology.
Yes. The uraeus on the brow represents the open eye, the eye of Horus or Ra. It's the result of that balancing act. And who is the guide for this process? Anubis.
The jackal-headed god, again, usually associated with death and mummies.
Right. But his title is Opener of the Way. And the source highlights a really specific detail about him. Anubis is associated with crossed eyebrows.
Crossed eyebrows, like a unibrow.
Not quite. It symbolizes the point between the eyebrows, the focus of consciousness. Anubis represents the focus will you need to pass the psychological trials.
Speaking of trials and getting devoured, we have to get to the climax of the book. The judgment scene, the weighing of the heart.
The most famous image in Egyptian history? The scale. The heart on one side, the feather of Ma'at on the other.
And waiting nearby is that monster, Ammit, the devourer. Now, the story is if your heart is heavy, Ammit eats your soul and you cease to exist. Game over.
That's the standard interpretation. But the source offers a different and honestly a much more profound reading. Let's look at Ammit's anatomy. Have you ever really looked at the parts?
It's a mix. A chimera, let's see, crocodile head, lion body, and the back end of a hippopotamus.
A very strange mix. The source identifies Ammit not as oblivion, but as confusion. The argument is, if Ammit eats you, you don't disappear, you get digested.
Yeah.
And where does food go after it's digested?
It returns to the earth.
It returns to the cycle of earthly life, reincarnation. If you fail the test, you're cast back into the heavy, unconscious physical world to try again.
Whoa, so hell isn't burning forever, it's just having to come back and do all this again.
Precisely, falling back into the sleep of matter. But here is the aha moment the source highlights, which almost everyone misses. There's another hippopotamus in the Papyrus of Ani. Tovis, the goddess of childbirth. She appears at the very end of the papyrus. But look at her body. She has a hippopotamus head, a lion body, and a crocodile tail.
Okay, so Ammit is croc head, hippo rear. Taurus is hippo head, croc rear.
They are inverses of each other, mirror images.
That is wild. I have looked at that scene a dozen times and never, ever noticed that symmetry.
It's the final visual secret. Ammit is the devouring into lower life reincarnation. Taurus is the birth into higher life celestial consciousness. The path is a choice.
So the whole book leads you to this one choice: get eaten and recycled or get born into the light.
Yes. And this explains the mamizi, the birth houses in Egyptian temples. The source says they're not for physical babies. They're for the second birth of the initiate.
Man, it changes everything. It's not a book of fear at all. It's a map of the human psyche.
And that brings us back to the critique of our modern perspective. We look at these texts with what the source calls scientific arrogance. We assume because we have iPhones and they had stone chisels, we must be smarter.
Right. We project our own materialism onto them. Oh, well, they were just obsessed with death and taking their furniture to the grave.
Exactly. But the source argues that while we've mastered the external world, the ancients mastered the internal world. And by dismissing this book as just funerary spells, we are missing the instructions for our own spiritual evolution.
It's a humbling thought. We think we're the advanced ones, but maybe we're the ones terrified of death, while they were treating it as just another door they had the key to.
The Papyrus of Ani isn't an artifact. It's a challenge. It challenges the reader, then and now, to ask, am I awake? Or am I just sleepwalking through life, waiting to be devoured by confusion?
That is the question, and maybe that's why this text has survived for 3,000 years. It's still waiting for us to read it correctly.
Indeed, it's waiting for us to come forth by day.
Well, I'm definitely going to be looking at those hippos differently next time at the museum.
As you should.
We'll leave you with this thought to mull over. If the so-called Book of the Dead is actually a manual for being fully alive, what does it say about our society that we only see it as a book for corpses? Are we the ones who are actually dead to the deeper reality? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.